my friend Mike for asking me to take a look at the 2-episode anime series created in 1993 known as Dragon Half. Dragon Half is based on a manga by Ryusuke Mita that launched in 1988 and continued running in Dragon Magazine through June 1994. The 2-episode anime was produced in 1993 and for some reason took 2 months after the first episode to create the second one. But then this is also an OVA that had plans for 4 episodes to be created, but then was dropped down to only 2. The story of Dragon Half is centered around the protagonist Mink, who's the daughter of a dragon slayer who was sent to kill a dragon but ended up marrying it instead. Thus, she's all human girl but with dragon horns, a dragon's tail, dragon wings, flame breath, and super strength. She falls in love with another dragon slayer herself by the name of Dick Saucer, or Dick Sother? He's also a pop singer, so he has a huge fan base. She finds herself wrapped up in the middle of tons of people wanting her dead when the king decides he wants to kill Mink's father for the treason of marrying a dragon so many years ago. So he's advised to take Mink as a sort of bait. It goes wrong, and now he wants her dead. But so does his daughter, Vina, who's also president of the Dick Saucer fan club. And when Mink accidentally kisses Dick by just stereotypically falling face first on top of him, Vina loses her dang mind over it. Now there's freelance monster slayers out to get her, eventually also including Dick Saucer himself, who's been tricked by the king into believing Mink is a full-fledged dangerous dragon. Mink's only meaning left in life is to find the elusive People Potion, which is said to turn any other creature into a human so that Dick will not see her as a dragon and will want to fall in love with her instead. It all comes to a head at a big fighting tournament where many of the major characters end up participating, with of course none of it taken very seriously. For the 2 episodes that the show runs for, it's quite hilarious. It's super loud and fast-paced, and it's super saddening to think that it never got more than 2 episodes. Even if you never knew there was a manga it came from, it's obvious just how abrupt the ending is. Mink is still in the middle of her journey to find this People Potion, and you never find out whether or not she finds it, or if she ends up with Dick Saucer or not. The manga ran for 65 chapters, but if you read the manga yourself, these 2 episodes speed run through the first 17 chapters and then stop. In fact, another plotline that lasts throughout a large hunk of the manga involves fighting and defeating a demon king in order to be rewarded with the People Potion, but it never gets brought up in the anime at all. This is actually comically referenced during the final battle in the fighting tournament at the end of episode 2.
Don't lie to me! I know for a fact that you said you were going to kill my father Azada-death!
What are you talking about? I've never even heard of Azada-death until just now!
Hold on a second. I've got to go check what happened in episode 1 again.
Good morning, Ming. Good morning, Luke.
Ah! They cut all my scenes out of the first part of the video!
Now this may not be especially interesting to anybody other than myself, but the word half, used to describe both Mink, who's half human and half dragon, and Princess Vina, who's half human and half slime, is a word that the Japanese frequently use in order to refer to biracial people. As a native English speaker, the word half sounds kinda insulting, but it's apparently far more preferred to be referred to as half than it is to use other words with derogatory insinuation. People who are half Japanese and half another ethnicity in Japan have a lot to overcome, as the country is widely beginning to embrace these people, but there are still large amounts of everyday places where you're just not going to be Japanese enough for most Japanese people. To juxtapose that with the series Dragon Half, it's clear to see that it's not good enough for many people that Mink is basically a human that just happens to have some dragon features. The reality is that somebody might not love her because she's also part dragon causes her some serious heartbreak, and not being human enough is the entire reason why she goes on the journey to find the People Potion in the first place. Now, all of this is played to comedic effect, and I never found it especially harmful, especially because it sits in a fantasy setting. But I think that even despite the fantasy setting, you can get somewhat of a taste of what the Japanese perception of biracial people is really like. Create your own social commentary about it from there. I just found it to be somewhat fascinating, if a bit hidden under wacky Japanese anime comedy. Dragon Half may be a bit forgotten in the modern age, but speaking as someone who was just finally actually admitting to liking anime when it was localized into English in the United States in the year 2000, I can remember a time when this title was followed around with some major notoriety. Mostly that notoriety came in the form of seeming really smutty. At least that's what everybody would have you believe. And while it's true that within the very last minute of the second episode you do see a pair of naked boobies, by today's standards, Dragon Half is relatively normal otherwise. Now granted, the manga tells you that the character of Mink, whose boobs you end up catching a glimpse of, is 16 years old, so that makes the boob shot kinda uncomfortable. But they never state her age in the anime, so... No, I still know she's 16. Nah, still kinda makes me uncomfortable. But for real, if you watch Dragon Half now, you've probably seen a lot worse. The girls in the series are a little scantily clad, and yet they don't really go out of their way to give us butt or boob shots other than the very last few seconds of episode 2. There's some mild swearing too, but aside from that, Dragon Half is just about as stereotypically anime as anime ever gets. It's slapstick as hell, with word puns, jokes all over the place, people going from standard human being size to super deformed without a second thought. It's just so anime that if you had to ask me to point out the most anime-looking anime I'd ever seen, it would probably be Dragon Half. And that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. I think it's a real road mark for what anime was in the late 80s into the early 90s, and gives a good impression for the direction anime would end up taking from the late 90s into the 2000s. Also, that ending song with a bunch of gibberish and words about food that I guess make up an omelet using an arrangement of some Beethoven is pretty catchy. And then I just want to say there's a mouse in this series named Mappy. Like, if that's not a direct reference to Namco's Mappy arcade game, then that's one hilarious coincidence. So the good news is that while DVD copies of Dragon Half were pretty scarce just a few years ago, Discotek Media re-licensed the franchise in 2014. In fact, you can watch it free and legally right now, both in its English dub and subtitled forms over on Crunchyroll. And late last year, manga publishers Seven Seas announced that they were going to be releasing the Dragon Half manga in the United States. It's still not out yet, but the Seven Seas website has the first omnibus volume listed with a release date of December of this year. That's still more than half a year away, but at least you can look forward to seeing the manga get an official English release for the first time ever, almost 30 years after it first ran in magazines in Japan. This is a great time to be alive if you're a Dragon Half fan who had to live through long dry spells with dead or dying Dragon Half fandom. Thanks again to Mike for suggesting that I review Dragon Half. I look forward to seeing all of you again in the next request review.